Okay, this part of the presentation gets into the dynamics of the yield curve. And it's extremely important to understand the dynamics of the yield curve because the yield curve is basically the base rate when you're building the cost of debt and equity and the weighted average cost of capital. So this is really your monetary policy and your macroeconomics, which is usually not integrated into your books, particularly the finance books. It's a prerequisite. You've already taken the macroeconomics, and you may have taken other macro or monetary policy courses. This is the systematic risk component. This is the base rate determination. So let's go through the dynamics of the yield curve. And again, this is review for you, but I think it's extremely critical because you'll see later on how important it really is. So the yield curve is upward sloping. The yield curve is the interest rate or the yield to maturity on bonds, government bonds, by the maturity. And in this case, in today's presentation, we are going to be using the 10-year Treasury yield as the base rate to determining the cost of debt and equity and the weighted average cost of capital. But again, you can trace out the yield curve by maturity and by interest rates. So 20 or 30-year maturities have a corresponding interest rate. And based on that maturity and that interest rate, the interest rate is really the cost. It's the cost of the debt. It's the cost of the debt for the government that's issuing the debt, and it's the rate of return for the bond investor. So the cost of the debt is the rate of return for the investor. And in this case, the borrower is the federal government, the lender is the bond investor. So again, in this case, we're going to be using the 10-year. Maturities on government bonds of less than 1 year are considered the money market. Maturities that are greater than 1 year, now get out. Get out. Let's stop that for a second because